The following program was produced by an independent community producer. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the ECAT staff or board of directors.
Giving a voice to the voiceless, pulling stories out of the shadows and putting them under the spotlight, making sure that each person is valued and cared for. This is Humanity First with Peter Evers, presented by BAMSI.
Hi, everybody. This is Peter Evers, and welcome to another episode of Humanity First. Today, we're going to be talking about the January blues a little bit. We all probably overindulge a little bit during the holidays, and many of us make New Year's resolutions. New year, new you. And so we're going to talk about that and talk about the efficacy, if you like, how successful are we when we make resolutions to ourselves? Is it the way that we should be approaching our health overall? And we're going to look at some of the ways that we can look at our health and concentrate on how we can stay healthy. Because I think if we look at the statistics, most people do not continue their healthy or their new or their resolutions pretty much far beyond the beginning of February. So we're going to talk about that when we come back. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I'm an essential worker here at BAMSI, and I'm a nurse. Nurses are essential here at BAMSI because as nurses, we really have the opportunity to make an impact. We have very small ratios, so we have the opportunity to really learn everything about the person served and be able to give the best care. It really serves such a great purpose for me as being a nurse and really why I came into nursing. Learn more about nursing opportunities at bamsijobs.org.
Giving a voice to the voiceless, pulling stories out of the shadows and putting them under the spotlight, making sure that each person is valued and cared for. This is Humanity First with Peter Evers, presented by BAMSI.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Humanity First. As promised in the first part of the show, we have Paul Bergeron, Dr. Paul Bergeron, who is our new Chief Medical Officer here at BAMSI. And I just want to start by saying this is a conversational show. If anybody listens to the show, they'll know how it goes. And these really are not issues. Dr. Bergeron is going to be talking from his opinion and experience, and not really as a medical professional. And I would say, under any circumstances, that people should always consult with their primary care provider or medical professional about any issues that we're going to talk about. But we're going to be talking very generally about New Year's resolutions today. And Paul, I just wondered if you wanted to take a second to introduce yourself and say a little bit about yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Hi, my name is Dr. Paul Bergeron. I also have my MBA. I practiced extensively in primary care and have had extensive administrative experience as well. I am now the Chief Medical Officer at BAMSI and very happy to be so.
Well, we're very, very glad to have you, Paul. And thank you for agreeing to come and have a little bit of fun talking about New Year's resolutions. It's something that we do. I don't know if it's a entirely cross-cultural issue, but certainly in Europe there is a tendency for people at the beginning of the year to make some oftentimes rather grandiose promises to themselves about how this year is going to be different from the last. It's also quite often on the heels of a little bit of overindulgence during the holiday period, and I imagine there's a lot of people listening, sort of nodding, saying, yeah. Sometimes one's liver needs a little bit of a break after a raucous holiday period. And so it is fairly normal for people to make those promises to themselves. And one of the questions that we were talking about in the preamble is that something that's successful for people? I read recently that the majority, 3/4 of the people who make those promises to themselves around whether they're going to go to the gym, whether they're going to have a dry January or whatever it might be. And I want to talk about that specifically in a minute because it's so popular at the moment. Everybody is doing dry January, at least an awful lot of people are. Is that the way to come at this if you're thinking about your own health? And of course, it is always good to be mindful about one's health. But You know, in your personal experience, what do you think? Do you think making these promises to yourself is a good way of going about it, or should we be more mindful about how we behave relative to our own health?
I think it's more of a global issue, Peter, than it is about this specific one. So, my favorite thing is going to the gym in December and then going to the gym in the first week of January. And what's fascinating is the amount of people that are there. It's just unbelievable amount. And then by February or March, it's back to what it was before. So I find it very curious in terms of how people think and what the implications of those thoughts are. So I think having this idea that I can pick a habit, we talk about alcohol. I can change this habit just by virtue of saying, okay, declaring, hey, I'm done. And then from there, suddenly you are. Things are much more complicated than that. There's biological things at work as well as psychological, physiological, that will get in your way in terms of being successful. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, if you look at the alcohol culture that we have in this country and in Europe as well, you're fighting a battle that's quite isolated sometimes, right? Because every time you put the television on, there is a commercial that really looks at people having a great deal of fun drinking alcohol. And I worry about upcoming generations in a way. What is their relationship with alcohol? I'm watching a show at the moment on TV, which is called Industry. It's an English show, and it is entirely full of people doing drugs and drinking. It is so normative in popular culture today. So actually promising yourself is an interesting thing, right? And there is a psychological piece to this. There's a meme that somebody's doing dry January and he's in the pub having a drink of cranberry and soda or something like that, and his friend comes in and he says, "Oh, what are you drinking?" And he says, "I'm doing dry January," and all of his friends say, "Well, we'll see you in February then." I mean, that's kind of funny, but that's how it is, right? You're making that decision on your own, and you're making a
Right.
big promise to yourself that it probably takes a little bit more planning and strategy in order to address issues that you have. And I know the work that we do. We do a lot of work with people who struggle with the disease of alcohol and drug addiction, and we work very closely with people on harm reduction. We say there is a pathway to recovery. There is a pathway to you being better and being in long-term recovery. And it isn't about just saying to yourself, "I'm going to stop." That is not recommended in addiction treatment at all. It is
No.
you need a lot of support. So maybe people are in some ways self-sabotaging a little bit by saying, "I'm going to drink an awful lot in December and then I'm going to stop," because you're the likelihood of you failing, as we said before, is pretty high. And so, I was a smoker 35 years ago, or something like that. I smoked in college and things like that. And I bought a book called The Easy Way to Stop Smoking. And when you're ready, right? And I just thought, what am I doing this? It's costing a lot of money and it's just not good for me. And this book, if anybody's interested in looking it up, everybody, it's called The Easy Way to Stop Smoking by a guy called Alan Carr. And it's like a little leaflet almost. It's probably 80 pages. And what it does is it tricks you almost psychologically into not thinking you're losing something, but being convinced that you're gaining something from making a change in your lifestyle. And I'm easily influenced, obviously, because I read the book once and I never smoked another cigarette in my life. I changed.
Impressive.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I changed the way I thought about my addiction. I changed it from I'm really going to miss having a cigarette after a meal to actually I'm going to be able to savor this meal in a way that is much more desirable than hoping that you finish it soon so you can have a cigarette. And that was really helpful for me. There's a lot of psychology in that, right?
Absolutely. And, there are lots of benefits for not drinking alcohol. And a lot of them have been most recently brought up by our Surgeon General. and asking for warning labels to go on any alcoholic beverages for good reason, because it literally is related to many cancers. At least 9 different cancers that we know for sure, that alcohol is definitely part of the reason why one will get those cancers. So there's a very large payback in terms of avoiding cancer, which I would say most people would prefer not to have cancer.
Would be
So in terms of like a big thing, that's a big thing.
right.
And then there's a lot of, I'd say, smaller kinds of things, smaller benefits that one can gain by not drinking alcohol. For example, not feeling tired, maybe not have as much weight on board, maybe being more motivated to do other things, have other hobbies that replace alcohol in your life. So I think there's a lot of benefits. I know there's a lot of benefits for not drinking alcohol. And they really go from the sort of relatively mundane to the extreme.
Yeah. I mean, I think I totally agree with you. And when you think about the benefits of not drinking, of course, there's a monetary aspect to that. And I've known people who have certainly not been in the throes of the disease, but have realized that that they need a lifestyle change. And that's the good thing about a resolution, right? Yeah, it might not work, but it might introduce you to the idea of not drinking, or maybe not drinking so much. And we do in motivational interviewing, which is an evidence-based practice for treatment, we introduce the idea of not drinking 7 days a week, but maybe drinking 5 days a week, and reducing like that. I think the benefit of that, and I've seen this in treatment, is that people begin to realize that waking up in the morning after having not drunk, and of course, our bodies change, right, as we age, and our ability to manage alcohol and any other drug, it becomes much more difficult for the body to sort of deal with the poison or the toxin that you're putting in your body. And so somebody who is really drinking a lot then begins to realize that actually I feel really good, and I feel like I can get up earlier. I feel like I can get more done, and so that really speaks to the idea of being more planful and being more strategic about addressing a lifestyle change. Because I think it is a lifestyle change. I worked for a long time with BSAS, which is the Bureau of Substance Abuse Services in Massachusetts, and we used to have and they still do. They have a conference on the Cape in the summer, and it's a wonderful experience because you get to meet so many people. And I stayed in a hotel with a bunch of people who were in recovery, and they were all long distance runners. I mean, I think it was a little bit of a coincidence that I was rooming with long distance runners, as I was at the time. And they spoke about how they traded a lifestyle, which is similar, right? This sort of need to drink to excess, and they traded that for something that was healthy, although their knees probably suffer in but something that's healthy.
Right.
What's your take on that? Because it seems that you're taking a sort of a brain that is wired in a certain way and wiring it to a different thing that isn't bad for you.
Yeah, I like taking advantage of that mindset and moving into something that may be more healthy. I think the challenge is you sort of intimated it, is that frequently people will do the next thing in excess. So going and doing healthy exercise, particularly as you age, we aren't going to pound on your joints as much, or aren't going to, maybe you're not a long distance runner, but maybe you're an average distance runner, whatever the heck that might be. You might be 3 to 5 miles as opposed to running 10 to 20 miles. I think those are actually good kinds of things that one can replace it with. And taking advantage of one's psychology, I don't think is a bad thing.
Yeah, right. And training yourself and being aware of it. And that's where mindfulness comes into this, right? I mean, I think many of us do things by rote. I was thinking this morning when I came in early this morning, I have a little sort of routine that I go through. I put my, food in the fridge, and I go and switch all the lights on, so that people won't trip over things when they get in. And it's one of those things that I've got really used to, and I do it without even thinking. We're creatures of habit in that sense, right? We're also creatures that tend to eschew pain and eschew bad things. We don't talk about bad things. Well, certainly being an English person, we don't talk about bad things at all. But we also get into habits that help us not address things that we really need to do, which is, some people eat when they're feeling depressed. Some people drink when they feel depressed. When you drink when you're depressed, it might be a short-term solution, and that is I guess what they call a maladaptive coping mechanism, that you drink to forget, but you remember at 3 o'clock in the morning, because this depressant that you're consuming is going to wake you up, and you're going to feel even worse about that. So the mindfulness issue, I think, is and I think many people are getting into TM, transcendental meditation these days. A lot of people doing yoga. What do you think about that in terms of really thinking about whole body and mind together?
I think that's the right approach. It's beyond, I've said a different question, but I think it's beyond just, okay, it's alcohol. We focus on alcohol. I think the idea of focusing on healthy lifestyle, which alcohol is, or abstaining from alcohol or drinking less alcohol is part of, is a very smart way to approach this. So it doesn't become this is one big thing, and this is what you live for, and this is what you're avoiding, and this is what you're concerned about. It's looking at things holistically, and I think mindful practice allows you to do so.
Yeah. Do you think, one of the things that, a very tragic story, one of my very good friends smoked cigarettes all of his life, and we loved him dearly, and we lost him. I think he was 65 when he died of cancer of the lung. And he was diagnosed with that, and we all went over one night to see him, and he was out on the deck smoking a cigarette. And I said, Freddie, you've been diagnosed with cancer and emphysema, please don't do that. And he said, well, what's the point? It's too late now. I think in treatment, as somebody who provided treatment, it's never too late, is it? It's never too late to address an issue that is causing you harm or distress. And I think the converse of that story, Paul, is that a friend of mine who is in her 80s, she's been sober for 56 years now, which is remarkable. I always, every decade of her recovery, we get together. But her mother achieved a long-term recovery when she was 82 years old. And on her 92nd birthday, she said to Ruth, "This is the best decade of my life.
Oh, wow.
I have overcome a disease that made me miserable for all my life. This is the best decade." And I thought, wow, that is so hopeful to people who do think there's no point in doing this. There's always a point. I always think, that I'm sort of borrowing from Martin Luther King because it was recently MLK Day, but the arc of recovery is different for everybody, the pathway to recovery, but the arc is always to wellness, and the arc is always to recovery, and everybody should be supported in that way. So sort of getting back to our original question, calling the question at the beginning, which is, should you take on a dry January? There's nothing wrong with doing dry January, right?
No, there's nothing wrong with it at all. And there are some short-term benefits. One of the reasons people die from alcohol use is accidents. So the idea of drinking less for a month, particularly if folks are drinking to intoxication, will dramatically decrease that risk for that period of time. So I think right out of the gate, it's worthwhile for that. And then the other part I would say is it makes you feel better. So I think there's nothing wrong with it. Does it set you on the right course going forward? To your point, you quit smoking cigarettes, cold turkey with immediacy. I'm sure some people do the same kind of thing with alcohol. There's not a lot that I've seen as patients or colleagues, but there are some. So having this dry January as an approach by itself probably isn't super useful, but I think it can give you some short-term benefit.
Yeah, I like the idea of introducing the idea of no alcohol as being a health benefit and feeling better. I mean, you do actually feel better when you wake up in the morning, when you take on those sensitive. Sometimes there's a fog. You realize that, well, that's not great. And maybe then you'll begin to look at, well, what about a dry February? What about at least like having half of the amount that I was drinking before in February, which allows people to have a break from these things. I mean, maybe it's not long enough to have a long-term effect, but at least you get an idea of what it's like to be to be not influenced by alcohol. This has been a great conversation, Paul. I think we're running out of time, but as we think about this, I think the takeaways really are, yeah, try it. Resolutions are good. It's a time to reflect and look on your life and say, is there something I can do? But don't bite off sort of shark bite sizes. Look at maybe some sushi bites, right?
Yeah.
Of how I can change my lifestyle. Because if you set those big goals, you're more likely to fail without the support of taking things a little bit step by step. Is that something that you would think about as we wrap up?
Oh yeah, I think incrementalism is incredibly helpful. If you think about anything, any kind of habit you could change, if you took every day and just improved just a little bit over a year, 365 days, you've pretty much climbed a mountain.
Yeah.
So I think the idea of focusing on incrementalism, having the appropriate support structure, having the appropriate motivation to change your behavior, I think all those kinds of things can be extremely helpful in any kind of habit that you want to improve.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. I really appreciate it. And food for thought for everybody as we're entering the new year. There's always the prospect of a lifestyle change that bends towards recovery and healthy lifestyle. So thank you so much, Paul. Really appreciate it. And maybe we'll come back in July and see how some of those New Year's resolutions, if any of them last 6 months. So thank you so much.
Why not? Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.